Evan had always considered himself an ordinary guy. The kind who could build a toaster from spare parts, but could barely chase a mouse across his kitchen floor. He had hoped that moving to Leda Station, a bustling orbital habitat orbiting a pale blue gas giant, would give him a fresh start. But space had a way of surprising humans in ways Earth never could. It wasn't the zero gravity that bothered him, or the endless hum of life support systems, or the occasional meteor showers painting the sky with streaks of light. No. What truly tested his patience was the mice. Not ordinary mice, these were genetically enhanced rodents designed for research experiments that had somehow escaped containment. They were faster, smarter, and seemingly capable of coordinated attacks. This morning, as usual, Evan stumbled into the small shared kitchen, half awake, still rubbing sleep from his eyes. He paused when he noticed Mara standing by the counter. Her long hair pulled back, apron dusted with flour. She was stirring a pan filled with golden eggs, their aroma filling the tiny kitchen. "You know," Mara said without looking at him, "if you spent as much time catching mice as you do spilling coffee, maybe the station wouldn't be crawling with them." Evan groaned, feeling the familiar sting of embarrassment. "I'm trying," he said, holding up a metal pan like a shield. "It's just... these mice are..." "Advanced?" Mara raised an eyebrow, flipping an egg with a practiced flick of her wrist. "They're mice. Tiny, useless, unarmed, and yet you still lose." She smirked, and Evan felt the teasing warmth that had become a regular part of their mornings. "I'm strategic," Evan replied, though his voice lacked conviction. "I study their movements, plan my attacks, consider all possible outcomes." Mara laughed, the sound echoing in the compact kitchen. "Strategic? Evan, you stepped on your own trap yesterday and screamed like a toddler. Strategic doesn't mean panicking at your own failure." Evan scowled, but he couldn't hide the smile creeping across his face. "Well, your eggs are amazing, though. Maybe if I ate more of them, I'd be braver." Mara's eyes twinkled with amusement. "Flattery? That's your new strategy?" "Maybe," he said, shrugging. "It's working, isn't it?" Mara shook her head, still smiling, but the teasing faded for a moment as she handed him a plate. "Fine. Eat. You're going to need energy if you're planning to chase mice today." Evan sat down, the taste of perfectly cooked eggs filling him with a small, rare sense of triumph. He glanced out the window at the swirling clouds of Leda Station's neighboring gas giant. From up here, Earth seemed distant, a faint memory of home. But he had learned one thing quickly: humans adapt, and he would adapt too, even if the universe, or its mice, tested him daily. The station had issued warnings over the comm system again. "Attention, crew members. Super mice activity detected in Sector 4 and maintenance corridors. Exercise caution." Evan groaned. Sector 4 was his responsibility. It was the place where storage units, water recyclers, and ventilation shafts met a perfect hiding spot for the clever little creatures. After breakfast, he donned his utility jumpsuit, tools strapped to his belt, and activated his small patrol drone. It was a rickety little thing he had assembled himself from spare parts and old maintenance equipment. The drone's camera flickered to life, scanning the corridor ahead. Mara followed him halfway down the corridor, carrying a small tray of leftover eggs. "Don't hurt yourself," she teased. "Or the mice. They'd be insulted if you scared them away without a proper challenge." Evan sighed. "Thanks for the support," he muttered. She smiled and left him to his hunt. As he entered Sector 4, he immediately noticed signs of mouse activity. Tiny claw marks on crates, chewed cables, and small, suspicious piles of food crumbs. The drones beeped softly as they scouted ahead, detecting movement in the vents above. He set up a series of small traps, baited with leftover protein bars. "This is it," he whispered to himself. "This time, I'll succeed." Hours passed. Evan moved cautiously from corridor to corridor, checking the traps and adjusting them. The mice were clever. They avoided the bait, used shadows to their advantage, and sometimes even seemed to study his movements. At one point, a mouse darted out of the shadows and snatched a piece of bait, disappearing into a vent. Evan lunged after it, and promptly tripped over a loose cable, crashing into a stack of crates. The noise echoed through the corridor. From somewhere above, a squeak echoed in what almost sounded like laughter. Evan groaned. By the end of the day, he had captured exactly 0 mice. Exhausted, covered in dust and scratches, he trudged back to his quarters. Mara was there, reading a data pad. "Well?" she asked casually, not even looking up. Evan collapsed into a chair. "They're impressive," he admitted, rubbing his head. "I thought I had a plan. I thought I was ready. But no. They're smarter than I imagined." Mara finally looked up, her expression softening. "Evan, you're human. That's why you matter. You might not be as fast or small or clever as they are, but you see patterns they can't. You adapt, you try. And even when you fail, you learn." Evan stared at her, surprised. She wasn't teasing this time. Her words carried weight, like a quiet cheer from someone who genuinely believed in him. He smiled faintly. "Thanks. For the pep talk. And for breakfast." Mara grinned. "Don't mention it. But seriously, try not to get eaten by a mouse tonight." Evan chuckled. "No promises." As night fell over Leda Station, the corridors quieted, and the hum of the life support systems became a soothing rhythm. Evan sat by his window. The lights of the station reflected in his eyes, and for the first time, he didn't feel like a failure. He had failed today, yes. But humans had a way of turning failure into experience, struggle into strategy. He would rise. He would adapt. And he would catch those mice, or at least understand them better. Somewhere in the maintenance ducts above, tiny eyes glinted in the shadows. The mice watched. But so did Evan. And the game had only just begun. He leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment, tasting the last bite of Mara's eggs on his tongue, thinking that maybe, just maybe, there was more to humans than raw strength or speed. There was creativity, persistence, humor, and a stubborn will to keep trying, no matter what. And in that small, ordinary room aboard a massive station orbiting a distant gas giant, Evan felt ready. The mice had better watch out. The next morning, Leda Station was unusually quiet. Evan felt a strange tension in the air as he stepped into the corridor. His jumpsuit already smudged with dust from yesterday's failures. He had spent the night thinking about the mice, reviewing every misstep, and imagining ways to outsmart them. The comm system buzzed. "Attention. Sector 4 residents. Mouse activity has increased overnight. All personnel must report unusual sightings or damage immediately." Evan sighed. He already had enough experience to know that unusual sightings meant little piles of shredded paper, tiny footprints, or a chewed corner of a maintenance panel. And the mice were getting bolder. Mara was already in the common area, assembling what looked like a makeshift war station of culinary devices and cleaning robots. She noticed Evan and waved. "Morning, hero. Did you sleep well?" Evan grimaced. "Like a log someone gnawed on." Mara laughed. "Don't worry. I'm not leaving you to fight alone today. But try to remember, brains over brawn." He nodded. Mara always made it sound so easy. But she had a point. Yesterday, brute force had failed him. He needed a strategy, a plan that used every advantage humans had: creativity, adaptation, and a little bit of luck. The two of them made their way to Sector 4. The corridor smelled faintly of burnt circuits and recycled air. Evan glanced at the ventilation shafts. Tiny whiskers peeked from the holes above. "See?" Mara whispered. "They're already watching you." Evan swallowed. The mice weren't just pests, they were observers, planning their next moves. He adjusted his portable sensor, a device he had jury-rigged from spare parts. It emitted a soft pulse that could detect movement and heat, helping him track their patterns. Hours passed, and the two worked silently, placing traps, checking vents, and noting patterns. The mice avoided all the baited areas, clearly learning from previous encounters. They seemed to anticipate Evan's every move. Evan stopped suddenly. "Wait. Look at this." He pointed to a series of tiny scratches on the floor near a crate. "They're leaving signals for each other. They're coordinating." Mara crouched beside him. "Coordinating? Like a colony network?" Evan nodded. "Exactly. It's almost like they're a small army." Mara smirked. "Well, armies need weaknesses, and armies can be outsmarted." For the next few hours, Evan experimented with a series of traps that relied not on strength, but on observation. He set up reflective panels to confuse them, motion sensors to detect shifts, and little pieces of food in a pattern designed to mislead them. "Not bad," Mara said, inspecting his work. "But you're still thinking too much like a human. Remember, you're competing with creatures that move differently, sense differently." Evan frowned. "So, think like a mouse?" Mara chuckled. "Yes, but without becoming one. Use what humans are best at. Imagination." Evan paused, thinking. He realized she was right. Humans had a unique ability to solve problems by seeing possibilities others might miss. He could combine technology, observation, and ingenuity to create traps the mice couldn't predict. He adjusted his plan. Instead of trying to corner the mice in the open, he would use the ventilation system. Tiny food lures led into a narrow passage where a small net could drop, activated by a weight sensor. It was risky, but it could work. Mara handed him a tray. "Breakfast," she said. "You're going to need energy if you want to survive the day without getting humiliated." Evan smiled faintly. "Thanks, again. Your eggs might be the only thing keeping me alive." Mara laughed. Flattery and food, two human superpowers right there. The day stretched on. Evan moved carefully, checking sensors and traps, while Mara observed from a safe distance. The mice were clever, darting in unexpected directions, avoiding direct confrontations, and slipping past most of his devices. But Evan noticed something encouraging. Patterns. The mice repeated certain movements, returned to familiar hiding spots, and avoided particular triggers. Evan adjusted his nets and lure placements in response, slowly turning the tide. By late afternoon, he had managed to trap a few of the smaller, less experienced mice. It wasn't a victory yet, but it was progress. Mara approached, her arms crossed. "Not bad, you're learning." Evan grinned, wiping sweat from his brow. "I'm improving." Slowly, the station lights flickered suddenly. A surge warning appeared on his portable display. The mice had targeted a maintenance panel, one critical to the water filtration system. He froze. If they succeeded, the entire station could face water shortages. Mara grabbed his arm. "Move. Now." Together, they rushed to the panel. The mice scattered as soon as they saw the humans approaching, but some had already begun gnawing wires. Evan acted quickly, using insulated tools to secure the exposed circuits. Mara handed him components from her tray, tiny clips and fasteners she had brought along. "Got it," Evan said, snapping the last wire into place. The immediate danger passed, but the threat remained. The mice were clever, fast, and dangerous, if underestimated. Evan realized something important. Humans were not the strongest or fastest in the station, but they were persistent, adaptable, and capable of collaboration in ways the mice could not anticipate. "You did well," Mara said quietly. "I thought you'd panic and make it worse." Evan smiled, a small spark of pride lighting his face. "Thanks. Couldn't have done it without your breakfast engineering," she laughed. Flattery and food again. Classic human tactics. "Keep it up. Maybe you'll survive." As night fell, the corridor grew quiet, but Evan couldn't rest. He stayed in the control room, monitoring the drone feeds and reviewing sensor logs. Patterns emerged. Secret tunnels, hidden caches of food, and coordinated movements that suggested the mice were far more intelligent than anyone had anticipated. Evan realized he had to think bigger. Small traps and random lures were not enough. If the mice were organized, he needed a larger plan, something that combined human ingenuity, technology, and Mara's creative thinking. He called Mara over the comm system. "We need to work together. I have an idea, but it's complex." Mara's voice came back, calm but teasing. "You? Complex plans? This I've got to see." Evan outlined his idea. Using drones, reflective surfaces, and small food decoys to herd the mice into a controlled section of the maintenance ducts. From there, they could safely relocate the rodents without causing harm to the station. Mara listened, nodding slowly. "It's risky, but clever. And it's the kind of thinking a human can do that a mouse can't. You're learning to see the bigger picture. How to stay, Joan. And the morrow see. And the morrow sees. We have go-owed. And the morrow sees." Evan felt a sense of determination unlike anything he had experienced before. This wasn't just about catching mice anymore. It was about humans asserting their ingenuity, surviving in a challenging environment, and finding creative solutions when brute force failed. Together, they spent hours preparing. Mara helped modify drones to carry small lights and sensors, while Evan adjusted the traps to interact with the drone's movements. By the time they finished, the plan was ready but untested. Evan looked at Mara, a mixture of nerves and excitement in his eyes. "Tomorrow we try this. Together." Mara smiled. "Tomorrow, we show the mice that humans aren't easy to fool." Evan nodded. The night stretched on, and he finally allowed himself to rest. For the first time, he felt a quiet confidence. Humans had survived harsh worlds, conquered impossible challenges, and adapted to situations far beyond their size or strength. Surely, a few clever mice were no match for human creativity and collaboration, and in the darkened corridors of Leda Station, tiny eyes glimmered from the shadows, watching, learning, just as he was. The next day promised a test of wits, courage, and human ingenuity. The mice would not give up easily. But neither would Evan or Mara. Humans were clever, stubborn, and capable of extraordinary things when the odds seemed impossible. And that was exactly what the mice were about to learn. The morning sun, or rather, the artificial sun panels simulating day aboard Leda Station, glowed softly across the corridors. Evan tightened the straps on his utility belt and adjusted his portable sensors. Today was the day. The plan he and Mara had spent the night preparing would finally be tested. Mara appeared beside him, carrying a tray of breakfast, her expression a mix of determination and amusement. "Ready to show those mice what humans are made of?" she asked. Evan smiled faintly. "As ready as I'll ever be. Let's hope this works." Together, they moved into Sector 4. The corridor was quiet, almost unnaturally so. Tiny shadows flickered in the ventilation shafts above, and Evan felt a rush of adrenaline. The mice were watching, waiting for a mistake. "Remember," Mara whispered, "we're not trying to trap them all. We're guiding them. Herding. Use their instincts against them." Evan nodded. His plan relied on a combination of drones, reflective panels, and strategic food decoys. The drones, equipped with small lights and motion sensors, would detect movement and guide the mice toward specific paths. The reflective panels would confuse and disorient them. The food decoys would tempt them into the controlled section of the maintenance ducts, where they could be safely contained. It was risky. One mistake could send the mice scattering, undoing all their work. But Evan felt a quiet confidence. Humans were capable of extraordinary problem-solving, even under pressure, and this was his chance to prove it. They set up the first line of drones, which hovered silently, their soft blue lights scanning the corridor. Evan placed reflective panels along the walls, angled to create confusing visual patterns for the mice. Mara arranged the food decoys in careful sequences, leaving gaps to guide the rodents toward the final target area. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, a faint rustling echoed from above. A single mouse appeared at the end of the corridor, its whiskers twitching as it approached the decoys. Evan held his breath. The mouse paused, sniffing the air, then darted toward the food. The drones reacted immediately, hovering closer to the mouse and guiding its path with gentle light pulses. The reflective panels created disorienting patterns, making it difficult for the rodent to change direction. Slowly, methodically, it moved along the path Evan and Mara had prepared. "Good," Mara whispered, eyes narrowed in concentration. "Stay focused." Soon, more mice appeared, following the first. They moved in small groups, curious and cautious. Evan adjusted the drones, redirecting the rodents toward the maintenance ducts. The plan was working, but then, a loud squeak echoed from the vents above. A larger mouse, clearly more experienced and cunning, appeared and charged toward the first line of traps. Evan panicked for a moment, but Mara grabbed his arm. "Stay calm," she said. "Adapt. That's what humans do." Evan took a deep breath and recalibrated the drones. He angled the lights to guide the larger mouse away from the sensitive traps, toward a side corridor where it could be redirected. Slowly, carefully, the mouse followed the new path. It paused, hesitated, then moved on, leaving the first traps untouched. Evan felt a surge of relief. Humans were adaptable. Even when faced with unexpected challenges, they could adjust, rethink, and succeed. Hours passed as they guided the mice through the labyrinth of drones, panels, and decoys. It was exhausting work. Every movement had to be precise. Every adjustment carefully calculated. But gradually, the mice began entering the controlled section of the maintenance ducts. Finally, the last group moved into position. Evan activated the final containment net, and it dropped smoothly, safely enclosing the rodents without harm. "We did it," he whispered, hardly daring to believe it. Mara smiled, a genuine warmth in her eyes. "We did, and you were brilliant." Evan laughed softly. "Brilliant? I followed your advice. I adapted." For the first time, Evan felt a deep sense of accomplishment. Humans were not the fastest, not the strongest, but they were clever, persistent, and capable of solving problems no other species could. They had taken a challenge that seemed impossible and overcome it with creativity and teamwork. But the victory was short-lived. The comm system buzzed urgently. "Attention, all personnel. Secondary mouse activity detected in Sector 7. Immediate containment measures required." Evan groaned. "They're spreading faster than we expected." Mara placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then, we adapt again. Humans don't give up." Together, they moved toward Sector 7, bringing the lessons of their first success with them. This time, Evan was more confident, more prepared. He knew the mice were clever. But so was he. Humans had survived far worse than rodents in space. They could handle this. As they entered Sector 7, Evan noticed something unusual. The mice were not acting randomly. They were coordinating, using signs, sounds, and tiny trails of food to communicate. It was as if they had learned from the humans' previous attempts. Mara observed the patterns. "They're smart," she said. "Too smart. But not unbeatable," Evan nodded. "We just need to think bigger. Not traps. Strategy. Observation. Guidance. Patience." They spent the next few hours studying the mice's behavior, mapping their movements, and predicting their next steps. Unlike yesterday, they did not rush into action. Every decision was calculated, every movement deliberate. By late afternoon, Evan had a new plan. They would use a combination of drones, reflective panels, and sound cues to herd the mice into a newly constructed holding area. A larger space equipped with comfortable shelters and food. The goal was not just containment, it was understanding, observation, and coexistence. "Are you ready?" Mara asked. Evan nodded. "More than ever." Group 4. The operation began. Drones hovered, lights pulsed, panels reflected, and sound cues guided the mice. At first, the rodents hesitated, suspicious of the new environment, but slowly, they began to move along the intended paths. Evan adjusted the drones, moving them closer to the mice. guiding them gently but firmly. Mara monitored the holding area, ensuring everything was ready for their new guests. Hours passed. The mice resisted, tested the humans, and adapted to the new environment. But Evan and Mara were patient. They adapted, learned, and guided. Slowly, the balance of power shifted. By nightfall, the final mouse entered the holding area. Evan and Mara collapsed against the wall, exhausted but victorious. "We did it," Mara said quietly, smiling. Evan laughed, relief flooding through him. "Humans, huh? We really can do anything if we think smart enough." Mara grinned. "Brains over brawn, always." Evan looked at the containment area. The mice moved around, exploring their new space, safe and unharmed. He realized something important. Humans were not just survivors. They were problem solvers. Adaptable and creative. Capable of overcoming challenges far beyond their physical strength. "Tomorrow," Mara said, "we observe, learn, and refine." "Humans don't stop after one victory." Evan nodded. "Tomorrow, we get even smarter." As they left Sector 7, the station quiet again, Evan felt a surge of pride. Humans had faced a challenge that seemed impossible, and succeeded. Not through brute force, but through intelligence, patience, and teamwork. Somewhere in the vents above, tiny eyes glimmered, watching. But Evan was ready. Humans were clever, resourceful, and persistent. And that made all the difference. He and Mara walked back to their quarters, the smell of cooking filling the air. Evan felt exhausted but alive, proud of what they had accomplished. "Breakfast?" Mara asked, raising an eyebrow. Evan smiled faintly. "I think we earned it." As they sat down to eat, he realized something else. Humans thrived not because they were perfect, but because they adapted, laughed, failed, and tried again. The mice had been clever, but humans were cleverer. And tomorrow promised another challenge, another test of ingenuity, patience, and teamwork. Evan leaned back, tasting Mara's perfectly cooked eggs, and felt ready for anything. Because humans always found a way. The next day, the station was tense. Word had spread among the crew. The mice in Leda Station were clever, bold, and growing in confidence. Sector 7 had been stabilized, but reports of activity in multiple other areas arrived almost hourly. The station's engineers and security teams were busy, but Evan and Mara were determined. Humans had solved the impossible once they could do it again. Evan stood in the narrow corridor of Sector 6, adjusting his utility belt. His portable sensors blinked softly, scanning for movement. Mara was beside him, her tray of breakfast abandoned in the mess hall. Her expression was serious, though a faint smile lingered at the corners of her mouth. "This is it," Mara said. "The big one. If we can handle this, the station will be safe." "But these mice, they're not like before. They've learned." Evan nodded. He felt a mix of nerves and determination. The mice had adapted, showing intelligence he hadn't seen before. But humans had something no rodent could match: imagination, strategy, and collaboration. They began their setup. This operation would require every tool they had: drones, reflective panels, food decoys, sound cues, and a new addition: Mara's experimental egg aroma dispersers. The scent was irresistible to the mice, designed to lure them into traps gently. Evan moved quickly, placing drones at strategic intervals along the corridor. Each drone's sensors were calibrated to detect motion, heat, and sound, sending real-time feedback to his handheld device. Reflective panels angled along the walls would confuse the mice, disorienting them as they moved. Mara carefully placed decoys along the planned path, the faint aroma of eggs wafting through the air. "We need precision today," Mara said. "No mistakes. The mice are smart, and they'll test us." Evan adjusted the drones, checking each one for correct alignment. "We're ready," he said. The first mouse appeared, a small, gray rodent darting from the vent above. It paused, sniffing the air, and immediately moved toward the egg scent. The drones responded, hovering beside the mouse, guiding it gently along the designated path. "Good start," Mara whispered, observing the process. Soon, more mice appeared. They moved cautiously but deliberately, following the lures. The reflective panels made them hesitate, giving the drones time to guide them toward the containment corridor. It was working. Evan felt a surge of pride. Humans were persistent, adaptable, and clever. Then, a loud squeak echoed from the vent above. A larger, faster mouse, clearly a leader, leapt toward the corridor, scattering the smaller rodents. Evan froze for a split second, then remembered Mara's words. "Adapt, don't panic." He quickly recalibrated the drones, moving them in a precise pattern to guide the larger mouse along a new path. Mara activated a sound cue, mimicking the squeaks of the smaller rodents to lure the leader toward the designated area. The larger mouse hesitated, twitching its whiskers. For a tense moment, it seemed uncertain, weighing its options. Then it moved, following the scent and sound cues toward the containment corridor. Evan let out a small breath. Humans could adapt, even when the unexpected happened. Hours passed as they guided hundreds of mice through the complex system of drones, panels, and sound cues. Every step required focus and quick thinking. The rodents tested them, darting off course, trying to escape, but Evan and Mara anticipated each move, adjusting their tools in real time. Finally, the last group reached the containment area. Evan activated the final net, and it dropped smoothly, enclosing the mice safely without harm. The operation was a complete success. Mara exhaled, leaning against the wall. "We did it. All of them. Safe and sound." Evan smiled, exhaustion and relief washing over him. "Humans. Huh? We really can do anything when we work together." Mara laughed softly. "Brains over brawn, Evan. Always." The station crew began arriving to inspect the containment area. They were impressed, some even shocked by the clever system Evan and Mara had devised. Drones, sound cues, reflective panels, and even the aroma of eggs had all played a part in guiding the mice safely. Evan felt proud, but he also knew this wasn't just about catching mice. It was about demonstrating the power of human ingenuity. Humans might not be the fastest or strongest, but they could solve problems others couldn't, using creativity, collaboration, and determination. Mara looked at him, her eyes softening. "You've come a long way, Evan. I used to tease you for being bad at this. But you've proven yourself," Evan chuckled. "And your eggs helped. I think we make a pretty good team." "Flattery again?" Mara teased. "Maybe," Evan said, smiling. "But it's true." The mice explored their new space cautiously. They had food, shelters, and enough room to move safely. The station had been saved, not by brute force or fear, but by intelligence and teamwork, the very traits that defined humans. As night fell, Evan and Mara sat in their quarters, finally relaxing. The station hummed quietly around them. The crisis was over, at least for now. "Do you ever think," Evan said, "about how humans survived so many impossible situations in history? Wars, space exploration, disasters." Mara nodded. "We adapt. We create. We work together. And we never give up. That's what makes humans, humans." Evan smiled. "I guess we're lucky to be clever, huh?" Mara laughed softly. "Clever, stubborn, and always willing to try again." Evan leaned back, tasting the last bite of Mara's perfectly cooked eggs. He felt a deep satisfaction. Humans had faced an intelligent, persistent challenge, and won not through strength, but through ingenuity, collaboration, and patience. The mice had been clever, but humans had been cleverer. Evan looked out the window at the swirling clouds of the gas giant below. The station glowed against the darkness of space. A tiny human outpost thriving where others might fail. And he realized something important. Humans could succeed anywhere, against any challenge, because they were adaptable, inventive, and determined. Mara nudged him gently. "Tomorrow," she said, "we observe, learn, and refine. Humans don't stop after one victory." Evan nodded. "Tomorrow, we get even better. The mice explored their new space, discovering the comforts the humans had provided. Some hesitated, others ventured boldly. But all were safe, contained, and observed. Evan and Mara knew that understanding and collaboration were just as important as containment. Humans didn't just conquer challenges, they learned from them. The station lights dimmed for the night cycle. Evan felt a quiet pride and relief. Humans had faced a seemingly impossible problem and solved it. Not by force, but by thinking, observing, and acting together. Somewhere in the vents, the smallest whiskers twitched. The mice learning to adapt, just as the humans had. But the humans were ready. Humans always found a way. Evan leaned back in his chair, exhausted but satisfied. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, as it always did. But he was ready, confident in the ingenuity, persistence, and creativity that defined his species. And as he looked at Mara, smiling beside him, he realized something else. Humans thrived not just on survival, but on collaboration, curiosity, and the simple joy of solving problems together. The mice had been a test, a small one compared to the vast universe, but it had shown him the truth he already suspected. Humans could face any challenge, and they would prevail, because humans always found a way. The morning after the final containment operation, Leda Station felt unusually calm. The corridors were clean, the hum of life support systems steady, and the crew moved with a sense of relief. The mice had been safely relocated to a controlled section, and for the first time in weeks, the station was quiet. Evan walked through Sector 7, now free of chaos. He checked the containment area again, making sure every sensor was functioning and every rodent had sufficient food and shelter. The mice explored curiously, unafraid, yet entirely contained. Humans had not only survived, they had improved conditions for another species without harming it. Mara followed, carrying a tray of breakfast. Her expression was relaxed, a rare break from her usual focus and teasing. "Looks like peace is finally restored," she said. Evan smiled. "For now. But it feels good to have some order, and to know humans can actually solve something impossible." Mara laughed softly. "You were brilliant, Evan. I used to tease you, but today, you were amazing." Evan chuckled, shaking his head. "It wasn't just me. It was teamwork, observation, patience, and your eggs. Can't forget that." Mara raised an eyebrow. "My eggs again? They kept me going," Evan said sincerely. "Brains and breakfast. Humans have two superpowers, apparently." She laughed, and for a moment, the stress of the past week melted away. The small victories, the laughter, the shared effort, it all reminded them why humans thrived, even in the most challenging environments. The crew began arriving, inspecting the containment section, and praising the ingenious system Evan and Mara had designed. Drones guided the mice, reflective panels confused them, sound cues guided their movement, and the subtle aroma of Mara's eggs had played a key role in their safe relocation. The station officers shook their heads in amazement. Humans had done what no one expected. Evan felt pride, but it wasn't arrogance. It was satisfaction. Humans didn't rely on brute force, they relied on creativity, patience, and the willingness to adapt. That had won the day. As the crew left, Mara nudged Evan. "Come on, breakfast is ready." They sat down in the small kitchen, sharing a quiet meal. The soft light from the station's window reflected off the distant gas giant, painting the room in gentle blues and purples. Evan savored the taste of perfectly cooked eggs, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with hunger. "You know," Mara said thoughtfully, "I think humans are amazing because we never stop trying. We fail, we adapt, and we try again. That's why we survive anywhere, even in space, even against creatures smarter than we expect." Evan nodded, considering her words. It's true. The mice were clever, fast, and unpredictable. But humans, we think, we observe, we find solutions no one else can. That's what made the difference. Mara smiled. Brains over brawn, and maybe a little stubbornness. Don't forget that. Evan laughed. Stubbornness? Check. Creativity? Check. Hunger for eggs? Check. Ready for the next challenge? She laughed again. Always. Over the next few days, they monitored the mice, learning from their behavior. They documented patterns, studied interactions, and even noted some surprising intelligence in how the rodents organized themselves. But Evan and Mara never lost sight of the bigger picture. Humans had triumphed because of collaboration, observation, and ingenuity. Even when other minor incidents occurred, loose panels, small power fluctuations, the station crew handled them with calm efficiency. Humans adapted, as they always did. The mice became a controlled study of intelligence and behavior, while the station continued to function smoothly. Evan realized something important during those days. Survival wasn't just about strength or speed. It was about problem-solving, creativity, and persistence. The mice had been a challenge, yes, but they had also been a lesson. Humans could face challenges, learn from them, and come out stronger. One evening, as the station rotated to simulate night, Mara and Evan sat near the observation window, watching the distant stars. The gas giant below shimmered like liquid sapphire, a reminder of the vast universe surrounding them. You know, Mara said softly, we're lucky. Most species wouldn't survive in space like humans do. We have imagination, adaptability, humor even. And that makes all the difference. Evan smiled. Yeah. And teamwork. You and me. We make a good team. Maybe even unbeatable. Mara laughed. Don't get too confident, hero. But yes, humans can do extraordinary things if we try. Evan leaned back, feeling the hum of the station beneath him. Humans had proven it again. They had faced a clever, persistent challenge, adapted, and solved it with intelligence and collaboration. And it wasn't just about survival. It was about thriving. Humans had made a better situation for another species, learned from it, and strengthened themselves in the process. That was the essence of what made humans remarkable. Evan glanced at Mara, who was quietly observing the mice in the containment area. You know, he said, I think humans are more than strong or clever. We're persistent, we're curious, and we never give up. Mara nodded. Exactly. That's why we're here, in this station, orbiting a gas giant millions of miles from Earth. That's why we can solve problems no one else can. Evan took a deep breath. I feel like, today, we really showed what humans can do. Not just survive, but solve, create, and improve. Mara smiled, reaching over to bump his shoulder gently. And we did it together. That's what makes us strong. Together. The two of them sat in silence for a moment, watching the small rodents explore their new environment, safe and contained. The station hummed around them, alive with quiet energy. Humans had faced a seemingly impossible problem and emerged victorious. And in that victory was a lesson. Adaptability, creativity, and collaboration were humanity's greatest strengths. Evan realized he had learned more than he expected. Humans didn't just survive challenges, they thrived on them. They found solutions, overcame obstacles, and improved situations for themselves and others. The mice had been a test, and humanity had passed. Tomorrow, Mara said, breaking the silence, we observe, learn, and keep improving. That's what humans do. That's why we always find a way. Evan nodded. And we'll keep finding ways, no matter what challenges come next. As the station lights dimmed, Evan felt a quiet satisfaction. Humans had succeeded, not by being the fastest or the strongest, but by using their greatest assets: intelligence, ingenuity, and collaboration. And somewhere in the distant stars beyond the station, the universe waited, full of challenges and opportunities. But Evan knew humans would face them with courage, creativity, and persistence, because humans always found a way. For Evan, Mara, and the crew of Leda Station, this was more than victory over clever mice. It was a confirmation of what they already knew. Humans thrived against the odds, adapted to the unexpected, and left a mark wherever they went. Evan leaned back in his chair, savoring the moment. Mara's gentle smile, the quiet of the station, and the knowledge of what humans could achieve, these were the things that made him proud. Humans were resilient, inventive, and unstoppable when they worked together. The mice had been clever, but humans had been cleverer. And that, Evan thought, was what made them unstoppable. The stars outside glimmered, silent witnesses to humanity's perseverance. Inside Leda Station, laughter, conversation, and the hum of life support systems filled the air. Humans had faced a challenge, adapted, and triumphed. And tomorrow, they would face whatever the universe threw at them next. Confident, capable, and never defeated. Humans always found a way.